Unser Führer ist tot, Lore.
Gehst du ins Gefängnis?
Du darfst nie vergessen, wer du bist.
The book was given to me at Edinburgh Film Festival, and it's by Rachel Seifert. It's called The Dark Room, and it's 3 novellas, and then we chose the middle novella, Laura. Rachel had done an immense amount of research to the point where it was fairly overwhelming. What we had to do as filmmakers was we had to do a lot of research into real people that had been National Socialists and were arrested, and why they were arrested, because often women were not arrested. It was only those that were very much implicated were. And Mutti was imprisoned for 2.5 years, and Vati was imprisoned, I think, for 10 years. So we researched all of that quite meticulously, and then had backstories for the actors, so they knew exactly what they were playing, what they'd committed, and they could come from a real point of truth instead of just, we're Nazi murderers and we've done this. They came from, I'm a doctor, I committed these crimes during the euthanasia program, I worked in the Einsatzgruppe, and I'm on the Eastern Front, and Mutti ran a children's home. What we wanted with the beginning of the film was total confusion in a way. For me, the confusion is encapsulated in the burning, in this massive burning of documents and letters and photographs. Everything that they had so meticulously kept was suddenly being discarded, and they wanted to leave no trace of what they'd done. And for me, the images in the fire of cases of people that had been murdered as part of the euthanasia program was really incredibly moving. There were a lot of difficulties, but I have to say that the beautiful designers I worked with, the costume designer and the production designer and my dramaturg, were absolute lifesavers and treated me with such trust, and all the time I was confused about certain issues, and they would make things clear to me and were incredibly patient. But the biggest stumbling block, of course, was language, and then the other one was actually the material, because we were walking this very fine line between making a film about the children of perpetrators and slipping off that track into something murky about something apologist, and that terrified me, the whole idea of that. People have said to me, oh, but the children suffered, and about their physical journey. It sounds really terrible, but the physical journey I almost didn't care about for the children, because I was so obsessed with Laura's psychological journey, and for me that is so much more important. And those children suffered almost nothing compared to many other children in Europe at that time. Moving from a place of indoctrination to a place of openness and ambiguity and humanity was what I was really interested in, especially with Laura. And yeah, I was fascinated with that she goes from this place of total surety. She's an absolutist. Everything is yes, no, good, bad, very hierarchical. And then she goes into this place of complete ambiguity and mayhem, and like a ground zero situation where she has to rebuild herself and out of the ashes of this kind of moral bankruptcy. And that was far more interesting than being hungry or, the physical journey. We looked at about 300 girls across all the major cities in Germany. I would have looked at about 30 girls personally, but we looked at a lot of tapes. And Saskia, I'd seen a photograph of her in the first week, and I said, oh no, she's far too beautiful. She's just too incredible. And then the casting director said to me in the last week, please see this girl. And she came in, and Saskia is a trained dancer. And at one stage during the casting, she grabbed hold of Kai Molina's shirt, and he backed away, and she let her feet go, and he dragged her across the ground. She was just screaming in his face. And at that moment I knew she was the right one, because we all started to cry. I think the producers at one stage might have preferred that we made the film in English, but then about 4 years ago I said that we should make it in German, and we discussed it for a few days and they came on board with that idea. And I think we're all really happy that we have, because we would have had to cast the kids not for their talent but for their language, and the 3 smaller children don't speak English, and a lot of the adult cast were from the GDR, and their first language after German is Russian. So it wouldn't have worked. We did a lot of research into Bund Deutsche Mädel, which is the German Girls' League, and I watched a lot of documentaries, and the whole movement was based around the idea of sacrifice, and that you sacrifice your body, you sacrifice your soul, your intellect, everything for the fatherland. And say in the beginning of the film, Mutti opens a box, and there's a cross in the box, and that's the Mutter cross, and that means that she's had 5 children. So she has a silver cross, but say if you have 8 children, you get a gold cross. And for women, the idea was that you would have as many children as you could, and that they would serve this new regime that would take over Europe. And that's how Laura was being brought up. And the other thing that was so embedded within Bund Deutsche Mädel was the relationship to nature, and the idea of being a good German girl in this perfect country, the greatest country on earth, the most beautiful country on earth, which also came from the Romantic movement, the German Romantic movement. So that was really integral to Adam and I when we were looking at the cinematography and the design, was this idea of Germany being a character within the story. We didn't storyboard, but the designers, Silke Fischer, did such an immense amount of research. So right at the end of the film, you see the little brother, the little boy, standing in front of the blue tiles. So what Silke did was use that blue from the very beginning, and Stephanie, who's the costume designer, took that blue as well, and say Mutti's coat became that blue. So we threaded that blue, Laura's eyes are that blue. We threaded that blue through the film, and the beginning of the film's far more vivid and lush, and then by the time they're standing on the Das Watt, the Baltic, the mud, everything is gone and all the colours are stripped away, and she's just got that one brown dress left, and she's barefoot in the mud. So it's kind of like she's just an empty vessel, really. Adam Arkapour and I, Adam's the cinematographer, we kind of had an idea that nature was almost watching the children, because so many atrocities had been committed, so much horrendous action had been committed in the name of humanity, and nature stood vigil and saw it all. So even when we have the shot of the little boy's feet, after they've stolen the Russian soldiers' food and he's killed by the Russian soldiers, And then we have these shots of nature. It's like he'll be encompassed again by nature. He'll just disappear into this void, this forest. What happened, which was really great, is my husband's family are German Jews, were German Jews. His grandparents left Berlin in 1937. So every draft he would read and his mother would read, and I would talk about with his 96-year-old grandma, Lisa. Because Lisa, Tony and I, or me, who's 96, we go to a Chinese restaurant about every 3 weeks. We talk about everything. She's 96. And we talk about the film with her and about the stories and the characters and his mum. And so I always had my Jewish German family, my husband's family, as part of it. I had their story as part of it, even though they're not on the screen. And it's Lisa, beautiful Lisa's photographs in Thomas's wallet. So when Laura's looking at the Jewish family, that's my husband's family. So the film became very personal to us, because if Ormy hadn't have got out of Germany, I wouldn't have my family. I'm really happy when I have people come to me and say that the film creates dialogue, because I think the hardest thing about being the children of perpetrators, and even in a way being a young German, is the silence. It's very difficult to talk about these issues on a personal level. On a societal level, Germany interrogates their history more than anyone, much more than Australia does. But on a personal level, what happened in families, I think that's very hard to discuss. So that's been really great. And people are inspired, I think, by looking at something they thought they knew and looking at it through different eyes.
Warum magst du ihn eigentlich nicht? Du darfst mich nicht verlassen.